I am trying to stay dry, bro. How are you?
Good. Okay, so we've been talking about this a couple of weeks, and I've read so many articles, and the problem with Substack, I can never find the bleeding articles ever again because you save them and it saves it in date order and stuff. I love the app, but it could do with a little bit of work. But anyway, if you've seen the kind of what's gone on in the last few months, it's like AI is the next big thing. It's both like crypto was 4 years ago, but it cannot just get over the last mile. It kind of got the last mile delivery problem. We all know how to use it. People using it privately a shit ton. A lot of people say allegedly that the Copilot isn't as good in the office as it is when they use it at home or when they use avatars at home, Claude, etc. But essentially, this last mile problem is something that HBR highlights, Wall Street Journal highlights, McKinsey, and they're all saying that everybody's gagging. They're all gagging for AI. Everybody's mad for it, almost like frenzy. But they can't get it over the line. And something you said earlier, which you'll touch on again, they just can't get it over the line. And they will point to all the things that we know, ownership, this, that, confusion, some stuff they don't really own. They've shipped out to Poland or India or Malaysia or whatever. But for whatever reason, it just can't get over the line. And so what a couple of firms are starting to do is to say, we need a head of AI enablement. It's a really mouthful. It's a terrible name. We need to have a head of AI enablement, and that person is kind of on the hook. And we've seen that with the Atlassian. We've seen it with like other firms, I suppose you could argue. Moderna saying we're going to appoint a head of HR plus tech. And I think that's the trend. So I looked it up on LinkedIn, and I think LinkedIn doesn't seem to give me the number of people in that job anymore. So I just scroll through. And I saw at least like must be 10 pages. And then I went on to Google and Gemini and stuff, and it says there are thousands of people doing AI enablement. Maybe they've just changed their title in the last 3 months or whatever, or they've been given a new title at Christmas. Who knows? But there's quite a few people doing it, and there's more and more jobs on the rise for this AI enablement. And just like digital transformation in our time, this could be the next big gravy train. So,
For sure.
Okay, mate, that's a little monologue intro. How do you feel about AI enablement?
Yeah, I think it's a natural step almost, Gary. Look, so an example as you talked about was Atlassian, right? So if you think about the sequence of events, they did the layoffs, 1,600 or so of them.
Yeah.
It was almost 10%, I think, of the global workforce.
Mm.
Then they did a reshuffle of the CTO. I can't remember the names. And then they're going, right, we're now an AI first restructuring, and now we're going to align our technical leadership. And that reads to me, if you think about subheadings underneath, it's like restructure, remove cost base, remove and rebuild around the AI, and then embed it culturally.
Yeah.
And I think that's the enablement and strategic positioning that's required in order for things like, okay, if AI really changes workflows, someone needs to manage it now. Okay, so if you bear that in mind, like, we spent all this money, we think it can transform everything, we think it can empower these people, but where does the buck stop? So having a head of AI enablement makes sense. Like even if you think about it, even if you didn't, a couple of weeks ago we were talking about forward deployment engineers, right? There's a huge surge in them at the moment. It's a massive discussion point on LinkedIn in the last couple of days I've seen, because of the announcements that OpenAI and Anthropic and Google, right, are now putting bets on the consultancy side. We're going to come after this sort of stuff, and it's all done through the lens of we're going to help you embed AI tooling systems into your systems. Now, if you're a business that's discerning about having an outsourced partner come in and handle all that for you, and you should be, then the natural course is, well, how do we embrace AI, stay competitive, but also manage this in the right way? I think having someone like an AI enablement thing works. And on Atlassian's case, they merged, right, two functions. They've collapsed this boundary between technical and people function. And now this person's grown different strands from, this kind of HR, CHRO role, as well as overlapping into this AI space. And without getting into it too much in terms of my thinking, but I would say without knowing too much, I suppose at this stage from kind of my perspective, standing off to look at it, that's probably a wise idea, because if this means that using this tool, these technologies, and understanding what those impacts look like is done through a person's lens, and the people that work in that business, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Yes, so I'd agree, mate. And just on a purely, let's just say, capitalistic point of view, there's a lot of money in there, in those hills.
Yeah.
So they're paying like 150, 200, 250, and bigger firms obviously much more. So it's, as I say, like digital transformation, which was a big thing in kind of my time in the kind of early 2000s, 2015-ish, before the kind of when we had started doing much more reg stuff. That was it. If you could do digital transformation, no one knew what it meant and what you were actually transforming to. So there was no obvious end state, like we're going to the moon and we're going to get there regularly. It was kind of like a feel, as I say, a kind of vibe transformation, as you would call it nowadays. So did you feel the transformation? And I think some of the AI stuff is very similar. People feel the AI, but the vibe is off a little bit. And I think the vibe's off because it says, basically, we're going to make you redundant. So that's naturally a vibe killer for a lot of people. So the more effective you are at the job at putting it in, the more likelihood of you being made redundant. So that is going to obviously kill the vibe somewhat. But I think the anxiety at the senior levels where they're not about to lose their job is, how long do we have before someone gets in a McKinsey or basically throws a stone at us and says, you guys are doing a rubbish job, whether it be a shareholder or activist shareholder like Bill Ackman or whatever I can, or you're just left behind by the other kind of competitors in the field. And I think I hear that anxiety from the C-suite quite a lot.
Yeah, of course, man. Because, effectively, the media press and coverage is always around this thing is going to make everybody's lives easier. It's going to empower you and it's going to supercharge your business. So if you're at the helm of that business and driving everything forward and you're underutilizing something like that, or you're unsure as to how to utilize it, then you're at risk, right? And unfortunately, we're so short-minded, mate, that we don't give people, particularly business leaders now, the benefit of making a mistake, because the mistakes are so costly.
Yeah.
So, so a real question, I guess, when we're talking about the examples we're talking about there, by merging these functions together or having this AI enablement, what is the purpose of the job? Is the role to help its people, the company's people, its real value, work better with AI, or is it about managing the workforce transition, as AI absorbs more tasks, right? Do you see what I mean? So are we trying to make sure that the pitchforks don't come out because AI is taking more of their work on, or we can actually help these people through AI? And they're two different things.
Yeah, it's a good question. So this article, if I could find it in Substack, the end point, he didn't actually phrase it this way, but I suppose you make a choice at a senior level, especially if it's gone 18 months, kind of 18 months since the peak frenzy of you've got to get it in, dead or alive. And if you're at this stage now, you kind of got to choose completely rewiring your organization, almost like rewiring your house, which is a ball ache, or redundancy. So redundancy gets you a kind of bump for 6 months. People are like, yeah, redundancy, that's the one. The Wall Street love redundancies and stuff. And then it gets you a bump for 6 months, and then you've got 6 months leeway to say, okay, how do I rewire this? But essentially, I was using an example to my brother the other day and saying, imagine if we had to rewire our house from AC to DC.
Yeah.
You're talking about? That goes, well, is it Americans use DC, we use AC, whatever, or vice versa? I goes, imagine if you do it, both work. Clearly, America's got electricity. We have electricity; it works. But what a ball ache! And you can't immediately see the benefit of that because, like, it worked before, it works now. Or someone, you know what, man, change all your plugs to continental plugs. Again, it seems like, why? It does work continentally. It works when you go on holiday. And for some people, it seems like that sort of superficial change. And I think the only way that the kind of senior guys and girls can get that change across is to kind of put fear. the life basically is going to produce out of people, which is we're going to get rid of 10% of your man. That's it. And so you're either going to put the new plug in, the two prong plug, or you're not. And if you're not, someone else would do it. And you're right, that's not necessarily the way, but it's been the way that's worked okay-ish, but still it's not that over the last mark. So I think if I'm going to get you onto your point earlier, basically before we started the pod, which is the absorption of risk. So I'm going to let you carry on of the absorption of risk and where risk lies and the impact that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, I'm trying to remember that point now, but let me roll into it. But I think your view there, look, the redundancy point is interesting. Just before we see if I can regain my thoughts on what we're talking about on the impasse, but the redundancy view is if we make a bunch of people redundant in the business, what that does is a few things. One is it shows when we come to talk to shareholders, our costs are going down, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you're outputting more, which is what the whole investment of AI is. Because I'd hazard to guess that if you were able to demonstrate immediate value in terms of more increased productivity that turned into money,
Yeah,
but you had the same number of people without losing any jobs, would companies still make people redundant?
yeah,
Right? But because they're unable to show that value and productivity immediately, they have to show that they're on top of the costs first. So redundancies happen
true.
while you're investing in this thing. Your balance sheet looks good. You've got better multiples to show with your shareholders, right? Because if you think about it, all those 5, 6 different companies that announced layoffs last week, not one of them are in the red. They're
Yeah,
all making good money.
true.
So they've done this to reduce costs so that they can make the optics look better. Fine, that's just the way of the world. I don't agree with it, but that's how the systems are. Then you've got a situation where you're talking about the people that remain. Are we in a situation where we're saying to these people, not you and me, but these companies, is it an iron fist rule by fear? To go, you saw what happened to your mates? See
Yeah,
all these empty desks? They've all gone. You're staying here because we think you're part of the future. But in order to be part of the future, this tool now has to be your best friend, and has to be in every aspect that you're working in that sort of sense. Is that the kind of messaging that I feel that we're moving towards, right? Because it's if I recover the kind of impasse piece that we're talking about here is the AI adoption thing isn't an infrastructure thing. It's not a tooling issue. It's a people issue, and
yes,
it's all about behavior. So that's why we're going to see this trend towards absorption of AI, be it a technical kind of point of view, but absorbed into culture. You have to embed it culturally into your business so that everybody understands and appreciates the importance of using AI within this sort of structure and framework and guidance and governance that doesn't cost the business or conflict the business anyway, doesn't mean that you're producing work slop, but actually enables you to do those things. But you won't be able to get your workers to do it if you don't, I guess, in their view, use fear or embed it culturally and have the right communication. Is that what we were talking about in terms of that impasse piece?
so there's that's a good argument because that is essentially the nub of the kind of the crux of the argument. And the question is if this is a new source of something, who owns that source?
Yeah.
And who absorbs the risks? So, a good example: we start a firm, we get a CTO. He or she is on the hook if something goes wrong. Yours
Right.
cyber guy or girl, you're supposed to sit at the right cloud. You're supposed to do that. So they can deflect the blame and say, well, I picked Google and it was fine, or I picked Azure and it was cool and it's all their fault. So you can deflect it in a way. But essentially, there's someone on point. So the question would be to your kind of cultural impasse is that in the past, you could argue that human resources never really had something they were on the hook for. In really extreme examples, if something they really screwed something up or they picked a bad vendor, but in reality, everything was outsourced. The contracts were some law thing that you set up early doors, and anything complex you set up used by lawyers. Redundancy, you use lawyers. You got obviously HCMs or whatever that you do, the ATSs. They're all external, so there's very little risk absorption. And you can see the areas where there's very little risk absorption. They tend to be roles where they're either lower down, unfortunately, on the C-suite kind of pecking order, or they turn over a lot. And basically, watching the marketing space for a while, and particularly the marketing space in a growth area like a startup. And they might turn over CMOs every 2 years. I think it's like, I don't know, 19, 20 months. It's insane. For C-suite, they're turning them over. And I don't think because they're bad CMOs, but because almost like the organization is constantly trying to rewire itself, which you are in the early startup first 10 years, sometimes people can't keep up, they can't rewire, they've got a certain way of working and stuff. Whereas I suppose you could argue the CTO is the person doing the rewiring in reality, and the product people are doing rewiring, and the CEO is somewhere in the clouds or whatever. So in that sense, you think, okay, there are certain roles that basically probably want to absorb the AI but don't know how to, or are afraid that they're going to absorb risk that they never really had before.
I mean, I think your point about the HR function and its accountability is interesting, because because you're right in the sense of, I'll probably do myself out of all the contacts I've got in the HR space if I'm not careful talking about this, but they do the bidding of the business, right?
Yeah.
My experiences and talking to people who've been let go, from friends and family to even my own wife, HR never really acts in the interest of the worker. They're on the behest of the company that pays into their pockets, right? And they have to sit there and do these conversations with you, and sometimes just on the video screen, right? But now in this function here, what's interesting is they have decided, well, not they, I mean, Atlassian's the one example, right? That actually we're going to give you this remit. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about this, where actually, how does the CTO feel about that, right? Why was the CTO not given this remit and mandate? Why are they not driving the AI adoption piece? Could it be because they're very tunnel vision in terms of maybe the tech capabilities of this and the other, what it could possibly do, versus actually seeing what I think is the most important thing? Actually, you as the CTO are not the only person using these tools. It'll be all these individuals, right? Like Coinbase, right, as the example the other day, they let go of so many people, and now you've got non-technical development, non-technical people as responsible for vibe coding, right? This is an exchange that handles money, right? That which I think is wild, man. But this is what the reality looks like in these businesses. So I think it is right to come out the CTO's remit, but not entirely. Clearly, they need to be on hand to talk to whoever is going to be the head of AI enablement, be it chief people person or whatever the function is, to ensure that they have those right guardrails in place, security, all those things that you and I, despite how much interest and reading we might do in technical development, right, we'll just miss. We don't have that expertise, So it's natural. But what the big bet is, though, is that when I read these things is, we look at you as a CTO, whoever it might be. You are not the person to help us embed this culturally. This functioning. And that is the big bet. And I think empowering that to a HR function could see a bit of a renaissance, mate, in terms of that side, right? I mean, who knows? But I think it should definitely belong to someone who gets to have it seen through the lens of the individuals using the tools, who work for the business, who are arguably the most important thing of the business, right?
Yes, so I think that's the bit that goes missing, I suppose, or had sometimes gone missing with HR, in the sense that whoever coined the phrase way back, human capital, it wasn't actually a good phrase. And if you had really pushed that and said, well, actually, you are our biggest expense is people, and it's an investment. Each person costs, I don't know, sometimes hundreds of thousands, whether it be to search for them, to pay the recruiter, yourself in the old days, basically then to onboard them, to really culturally onboard them, and actually physically onboard them, and legally onboard them, all the other stuff. It's a big investment. So it could be half a bar quite easily for even like sometimes a junior employee. So you're like, wait a minute, I'm $1 million investment here, and I want to make sure it pays. And if you had seen it in that light, it would be very, very different. And so I think AI kind of forces that now, because, as you're right, the CTO, the person that makes sure the tech works. But if we rename it, as I like to rename stuff in a meaningful way, it's more like digital labor. Just like you could
Labor.
outsource labor, which is like GCCs, whatever, India, Bangalore, whatever, blah, Malaysia. So this is outsourced labor, and this is synthetic or digital labor. And so the question is, who or digital workforce, who is the best at managing workforce? Well, actually, there's companies called UKG and stuff, and then obviously then internally it's the HR, because they've always managed a workforce. They could be a sexy workforce, they could be paid, they could be people doing part-time, full-time. They've managed a workforce. I suppose it is a leap for them to start managing a digital workforce, but not as much as it is for, say, technology to manage a workforce, because they don't know any of the procedures and how it works and embedding and onboarding and stuff. All the things that are relevant to HR now. One, who are we dealing with? They deal with recruiters like yourself. They check them out. They do all that research. They know the score. Two, how much is it going to cost? They actually do that. Do a really good job in HR of that. Three, let's get all the agreements in place. Four, when are we going to review this contract, or renew this contract, renew it, whatever, renegotiate it. Five, how are we onboarding this baby? What happens? When do we pull the plug? Can we pull the plug? Blah, 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 blah. All pretty much all the things that you do that when you onboard a person are kind of at the riskier end compared to onboarding a vendor, if you ask me, because then the person can individually sue you much more than a vendor can, if you're a big firm. So I think they've got all the kind of technology in their head of what they would do. All those steps are relevant. Looking for a new system that's going to have to be aware that they are able to find these new digital labors, which is the best firm to use, etc. So I think it lines up for all the reasons that it could be a HR kind of expansion, completely relabeled as, I don't know, workforce management or something, I don't know, that encompasses humans and AI, digital labor. But I think they would need some sort of finessing, because the generic HR person is very, very good, but tends to be risk adverse maybe. And really now it's a risk-seeking role, because they've got to really risk to investments. Do I take man on as a human, breathing, living, breathing, or do I take man on as a digital man, which is like a digital twin of man? So that's a choice.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a few steps ahead, isn't it, as well? That is probably what the conditional labor force will look like in the future. Where I mean, is it so far-fetched? It's almost science fiction, right? But is it so far-fetched where if you and I work together in the same business, Gary, that there is a digital equivalent of ourselves with the same kind of skills and attributes to an extent, right, inside an LLM that they can call upon and work in our stead when we're on holiday, sick day, or whatever it is, or in
Yeah.
partnership with each other. And that takes a special kind of ability and understanding to how that all feeds together as an ecosystem. It's a new ecosystem that you can manage effectively. But that's kind of over here, right? I think, where it is today, what's happening, as you said right at the beginning of this, the final few yards seems too far away for a touchdown at the moment with a lot of businesses,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so much confusion, noise, skepticism, fear, hate of these tools as well because of people losing their jobs, and quite understandable. I mean, I was listening to Scott Galloway talk about this. I don't know where he got the stat from, but he threw away this number where he said, the unless you're earning $200,000 in the US,
Yeah.
everyone below that, when they surveyed it, has a massive disdain and distrust for AI.
Yeah.
If you ask anybody that's over 200,000, they love AI, right? Because of all the opportunities sort of creating for them. So, it's becoming this thing where it's creating the haves and have-nots even further. Now, on a business sense, calling it AI enablement instead of things like automation, mate, is clever. Just think about that as a narrative, right? Especially after layoffs, it softens the narrative. You're going from cost cutting to I'm going to help you build more. I'm going to help your capacity to learn more, right? So that and whilst the workforce isn't necessarily going to judge you based on your title, but more on outcomes, I think it does a lot from a PR internally and external point of view to say we're creating this enablement capacity. It's going to be ran by someone in the people function because we care about those people.
Yeah.
And in a long-term view, we see actually there's going to be a digital labor force that's going to come into penetrate this traders business, work with our customers that also need insight and working out. And if you think about everybody on the C-suite, mate, are you going to give it to the CEO to do? Probably not. Certainly not the financial CFO, maybe not the CTO. Probably not the CMO. Probably
Yeah.
the right person is going to be the CHRO. So you can kind of see it happening. I think what you positioned earlier, though, mate, about that digital labor is going to be super interesting, man. I mean, I sit back sometimes and think about this. Once agents not only talk together but plan together, work together in
Yeah.
such a cohesive manner that somehow a human still has some control over me. I mean, all bets are off.
Sure.
That's like from that side. But I think the point being smart at the moment to call it enablement over automation. I think that's a good route for them to sort of try and drive down, right?
Yeah, so I think that that's the kind of problem. Because essentially, the way that you have to sell it is like automation augmentation, which is going to make you a little bit better, mate. It's going to be golden. We're going to make you a little bit better, 10%, 20% better. But in reality, it's kind of the same as we weren't trying to make horses better with cars.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We were trying to completely say, actually, both are valid methods of travel, but actually they can't both exist on the same road in reality, not forever, for a short time, up to like 1910s or whatever, 15s, but by 1920, no chance. And I think it's like that. And so, if we're honest, the role isn't really workforce management. That sounds really horrible or whatever, it sounds like UKG and stuff, but that's it. And then whether it's offshore, onshore, nearshore, Jersey Shore, digital, human, whatever.
Yeah.
You can argue any of those, and that's it. That's the role. And then obviously, in between that, just like your pension advisor, it's like here's a bunch of assets. You manage them and optimize them the best you can to give me either income or appreciation or whatever it is. Tax
Mhm.
efficiency. They're the asset pool. Go out and multiply. And then seen in that way, they become almost like architects. They're architects of a workforce architect, just like Amazon is actually very good and quite horrible at the same time of architecting efficient work processes which have humans. They outsource stuff to even like Yevry delivered something on behalf of Amazon the other day. So they're able to basically integrate and utilize a massively expanding workforce of different suppliers, sometimes some robots, lots of humans, and it's just post office. They're able to do a lot because all they're saying is actually man's got one goal, 20-hour delivery or 10-hour delivery or whatever it is. That's it. The customer's got one goal. And then what we got to do in the background with all the kind of labor, digital labor, whether it be physical digital, synthetic digital, people, union busting, whatever we've got to do in the background, man doesn't care. He just wants the 24-hour delivery. So I think what's missing is that kind of focus from one person in the C-suite that says the customer happens to be internal, it might be the CEO or shareholders, and they want a efficient 4 nines process, 99.99999, without any deaths or anything or crazy. And we don't want any strikes or anything, but I've got to optimize that as you say, culturally to make sure, just like Amazon, things work pretty smoothly, albeit, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of rock and roll and arguments in between.
So workforce management obviously it already exists as a comparable part of what a HR function would do to an extent, right? But then it's delegated, isn't it? Because someone not performing in their business as part of workforce management isn't directly the HR function's responsibility. It's the direct line manager. So this is going to be interesting. Like I don't know how this ends up phasing, when you try and architect the kind of positionality of this. Do you position it where it's like, all right, we've got 10 agents now that sits in, I don't know, back in the day, mate, when you were in the bank and you're working in this kind of middle office side, or you're working with the traders there, and I give you an agent that could do some of the work for you, and is the job there of this person that sits in this enablement thing looking at is the first protocol, rather than going everybody gets this AI agent.
Yeah.
You basically look at either your rock stars that are doing great and you help them even further, or you look at the people that actually need the help and help them. Like, is it the judgment of those kind of things that will? Because I think you're right, mate. I mean, however they want to fucking dress it up, enablement, automate, whatever it might be, it is optics.
Yeah.
It's for external people to think better of you as a business, but internally, it's the individuals that actually are on the ground that will have to deal with whatever these changes are. And when it comes to workforce management, mate, is it going to be a case of you no longer need to do this part of your job because this has all been handled by these agents that we've created?
Yeah.
Or is it a case of actually we love that you love this part of your job. This agent is going to help you do it even faster or better, or help you upskill to help all these people. It all remains to be seen, mate, because it can either be an incredibly positive rollout and implementation that can create some great value for you and me or whoever it is working that business, or it can be one of the most maleficent things there is, man. It could be completely almost insidious, you know?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what you find is company go through waves and waves of cuts in the kind of, well, all the way from like the 1990s onwards. And it could be every 4 years or whatever. And every time there's a kind of huge cut, there'd be a committee, and it would be a cost committee of some sort. And it would be, well, man, I know you say you need that role, but do you really? And then they
Yeah.
make it through some sort of shenanigans to get it and to present it at a board or whatever. So if, say, the companies are getting rid of 10% or block 40%, there is no way they don't have some sort of control gate which says every new role has to go through this control gate. It could be a committee, it could be fill out this crazy ass form and the AI is going to look at it. It could be something, but there's some sort of control gate. And we're saying, who is the person that oversees that control gate? And to me, that would be enablement, because it'd be like, yeah, we got rid of 40%. Yeah, obviously, Jack Dorsey blagged it a bit on Wall Street and said it was all AI. We don't know if it is, but my job is to make sure it is. So the next time man applies for a role, I'm going to make him break it down into 5 different agents, or 3 different agents, or 2 different, or 1 agent, and say, break that role down into 5 bite-sized chunks, man. That I know you would have got 1 person with these skills on LinkedIn to do it. Actually, you're going to get 5 agents now, mate. There you go. So I'm going to give you a form. It's going to be a crazy ass form. And you're going to fill it out, and you're going to have a job requisition. I'm making this up on the fly, by the way. A job requisition form, and it's going to have, this is a job. And you're not going to, I say, okay, well, I might employ someone from school for that. Okay, because that does need nuance. And then the other 4 are going to be agents, because you're going to break down that role that you might have encompassed as one role before. You know, like when they say, we need these 15 skills. No. You're going to break it down into either like 5 skills of 3, or actually 15 different roles where I may employ agents, I may employ school leavers, I may employ someone from India or Malaysia or whoever. And so I think they're going to make you break down every single skill into a job requisition.
Yeah, I think that's a very likely prediction. You know, because what if I ran a business and I was very profit motivated only, that's exactly what I would do, because I would matrix all the kind of skill sets that belong to a particular function, and then I would work out what overlapped with all the other functions within the business. So it could be, Gary, if we're a global workforce, you could be doing something that employs a certain set of skills that is used in a completely different department or different area region, but they also need those set of skills. And then it'd be worth my time as an enablement officer to go, right, these are the AI agents that we need to sort of create because it can impact positively in these particular areas. Or do we actually hire people to do these skills instead, using AI as a kind of hybrid position or whatever it might be? Or do you just go full scale with those agents? That is a very likely thing to happen, mate. Because, you know, when I've been working on a lot of kind of analysis of the market in terms of what's happening with the workforce, and effectively try and help people answer, is my job at risk of displacement?
Yeah.
And all my research and work it's nothing to do with job titles, mate. Nothing at all. Every element of it is to do with skills. That's it. What those skills are, and then actually as part of those skills, what are the human attributes for that skill, and what are the actual non-human attributes that you just know that you could just replace it with. And
Yeah.
then you start applying the maths to build around this job is likely to be displaced because of this reason, etc. And it's interesting. That is the way that I believe will happen, where you're trying to gauge actually who should be, what function should be going. So the converse of that should be no different to actually how do we hire or create this digital labor force based on those particular skills only.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what their function is, dude. To look at that.
Yeah, so it could be. I hadn't seen that. I read a few blurbs on a few enablement officers. It didn't seem that way, but I could definitely perceive that would be way. And what it forces is every single kind of hiring manager to kind of rethink, because I'm an accountant. So if I'm hiring an accountant, I'm generally not looking at the accountancy part. It's like that's a given. It's like you can do accountancy. So we do a couple of tests. It's generally like, where have you come from? Have you done a job when you're like 12 years old? Really random stuff I used to look for. I don't even ask. And it was like, okay. And generally it worked out okay. Maybe 55-45 hit rate. Who knows? But for me to break that down into one skill requires me to be trained by the enablement officer as well, because I now need to know how to fill out a job requisition form. Similarly, now I've got to retrain all of these new kind of recruiting firms that I think maybe will spin up, which would be, well, actually, we help you recruit agent workforce or synthetic labour. Then this is, again, me making it up. But if you're in a market and there are like 100 people to recruit from recruiting pool and it goes down to 90, there's got to be less players in that market. So eventually, if there are less people in the employment market, there's got to be less recruitment agents, or they've got to move to a digital world, etc. It just has to happen. And so some will move into synthetic labour and say, well, actually, yeah, it was a procurement job or G2, whatever it was. But actually, no, you're going to give us a spec and we're going to go out and search for all those companies, the thousands of like YC companies that do that kind of agent. And then we're going to come back to the enablement officer and say, these are the candidates. Let's have a look. Let's get the hiring manager in and let's do a kind of beauty pageant as you would do an interview. So if people take it seriously, then how they think. But I've heard very few people talk about this because I don't think they're taking the labour replacement that seriously. But if you are, then you need to have all the practices in place that you had when you recruited labour.
Yeah. Just to go on to your first point there, mate, I'm not surprised that if you went online and tried to look for enablement officer roles, AI enablement officer roles, that's not listed in their skill set, right, or requirement. Your job is to analyze everybody's skills, distill it down to a functional skill, and then create an AI agent to mitigate that. I don't think, but they're not going to publicly say that. But I think that will be the case. Like you can see, look, you only need to see what's happening with things like what happened rather, although it's less than sort of 12 weeks ago. Feels like old news, right? With OpenClaw. When that came out on the scene, the amount of adoption was insane. It effectively was touted that it saved Apple's quarter, right? Because of the amount of Mac Minis it sold, which is crazy. And
Yeah.
mate, it's insane. People are buying dedicated computers to run these agents, right? Giving them their credit cards and allowing them to run this, that, and the other. And since then, that ecosystem is mind-blowing. A social media platform for agents, right? Marketplace for the agents.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about that marketplace idea, to your point about the recruiter, yeah, I think the days of a recruiter to do what certainly we achieved back in, the early 2000s rather, isn't going to be there anymore. I think the opportunities changed quite considerably. I'm already seeing, so many agencies pivoting towards this kind of AI lens and helping people set things up in an AI kind of point of view. In some regards, mate, I kind of feel like, we're like the turkeys voting for Christmas. Let's help companies become more dependent on themselves, use more AI dependency, and then depend less on people, which kills the market for recruiters. And you can see that because of all these AI agent marketplaces, mate. Largely speaking, at the moment, they are consumed by founders, small companies, because they have the agility to adopt these things in. Now, what's going to happen, man? We're already seeing it. One or two person, less than 10 people companies making so much impact, not just money, so much impact that they become a threat to the more established players. If you're an established player carrying a massive workforce, you've got a big advantage in a different way, but they don't see it that way. They
Yeah,
see it like these guys, time to market so quick. How have they done it? They've adopted AI agents. We need to do that same thing. But you can't basically have a human and an AI agent doing the same things all the time, because all that will do is create friction,
yeah,
create more issues with this. So it will happen, man, because I can't see companies not be so profit and incentivized driven to just basically satisfy shareholder whims where they don't go, we need to do what this young guy's doing here at the moment and just buying all the, getting this, that, and the other agent into here. We're seeing it already, mate. We see all these discussions happening. You can see and once the big four consultancies start using agentic models into their SOW to handle their customer side, I think that establishes more precedent where people are expecting this kind of synthetic labor force that's going to be doing your report, signing this off, creating that for you that you may never even know about, you know?
true, true. You had a number of points there, but one of the things that made me laugh a minute ago is if you think about the stupid stuff, not
Stupid stuff.
as in so the naming of the candidate. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
go to a university milk round and you've got Jimmy, Jane, Jemima, Jimbo, you've got Man, and you've got a guy called, say, you know what, I was called Man, but now I want to name myself Iron Claw. What? We're going to take that guy on. Is that guy going to get a second call back? Probably not. So the naming convention a bit back, let's be fair. I mean, you're going to have to, if you're going to kind of go the whole anthropomorphic route and whatever and call it synthetic or digital labour and labour replacing human stuff, you've got to do a better job marketing. Not just the fact that it's going to be doom or gloom and the world's going to end, but you've got to start to think of these systems as a brand. And you've got to say, well, this is a brand and this is the kind of brand we're buying, like we bought in SAP or you bought in PeopleSoft or Gusto or whatever it is. There's that. And then there's does anybody actually think about what the end state is? Because they all say, yeah, we're going to have a mixture of
No.
hybrid and people and like processes and AI is going to be, but I'm not quite sure they have. Because if they had, they would be thinking about rewiring the whole organization. Not heard anybody talk about that. You're right, startups can do it if they got less than like 50 people. Once they got to about 50, even they struggle, even startups struggle to completely reconfigure around what they're actually doing. And so I've been trying to kind of tout this theory in the pricing community, and it's kind of not really taken off. But it's the kind of, I'm trying to create a cartoon on the back of it as well, like a comic strip thing, but not funny cartoon, but something I can make into a series. And the idea is, what if we all live in by the meter? As in our life
Right.
by the meter, and the meter is essentially tokens. Whether it be, it goes into hospitals, and whether man's allowed dialysis, he has to see, has he got enough credit for the dialysis today? If not, he needs a top up. No different from actually electric top up, to be honest. What about a trip to school on a bus? Well, actually, we've got an Oyster. Okay, well, that's electric bus now, and it's run by AI. Then we need credits for that. But more importantly, in the workforce, is actually, what if everything is run by credits? Because that's what we're saying. We're saying the cloud is already run by credits the last 15, 20 years. But we've just been abstracted from that issue. Now it's real because the costs are real. Before it's like 10% overall cost. Now it's like real. So now we're saying every single action, whereas before we just took man on, we paid him whatever a day, and whatever thoughts he had during the day, good, bad, ugly, that's it. We just paid all in. Eat as much as you
Yeah.
like. But
Yeah.
now we've got to almost like pay per thought. And so now I've got to think, is man thinking about work or is he thinking about lunch? Is he thinking, this is a ridiculous example, I told you it's silly. What's he thinking about now? Because he's burning compute, that's for sure. Is he thinking about the right thing? And so this is really dystopian, but it didn't matter as long as they weren't completely taking the pee. Generally, you're like, he's on board, she's on board. Whether it takes 10 hours, 12 hours, 8 hours, just get the work done. But if you're on a pay per compute or pay per thought model, which we are with AI, then it's very different. You need someone to almost like to legislate thought, when you can think, how much you can think, and where that thought goes. If we're talking about the
Yeah,
AI.
you reminded me of the talk Sam Altman did, right?
Yeah,
When he I can't, where was he? Maybe I think he was at some sort of an investor event
yeah,
where he was trying to tout for infrastructure, but it was the whole concept of that. The vision is you're tokenizing for intelligence, right? Which is what effectively this is. But we just didn't realize it was that case because we're
yeah,
asking it to do stupid things and asking questions like, "Can I eat this?" or
yeah,
is this whatever? And that's the intention, to absorbing the intelligence that is scraped off the internet. Everybody else is kind of said, our combined intelligence scraped,
yeah,
packaged back into this chatbot, sold back to us on a meter. That's what this is, And I think it's important, mate, and sanity checking to acknowledge that that is what that is.
yeah,
And then when you're trying to take that as the model to replicate a human being who, yes, will think about lunch, their kids, the weather, whether they're hurting from the gym, tired, or whether they're excited because they're going on a date later while they're in the midst of trying to do all this work, right? The human aspects of that. And it's whether a company in the end sees that as wastage
hmm,
that eats into their 8 to 10 hour day over, is it 2 hours that they're doing this cumulatively over a week or over a day?
yeah,
How much is that costing? Versus actually, we just need to be very exacting, specific, and efficient with an AI model that doesn't think about their kids because they don't have any or this and the other, right? And that's where it comes and boils down to. Now, that's all well and great within reason because when you put it side by side, there's no competition, right? There's no way my clarity of thinking is going to be. I mean, I've got ADHD, mate, so I'm like all over the place.
yeah,
So when you could put me next to a model like a Claude or a ChatGPT, of course they're going to eat me alive, right? However, this is all whether we've asked the AI to do the right thing, mate. I had to completely process re-engineer something yesterday, mate. It took me absolutely ages because
yeah,
it misunderstood what I was trying to ask
yeah,
it to do and
yeah,
rewrote so much of the code. I've just been sitting there picking up. I'm a non-technical person, man, trying to do
yeah,
that. But
yeah,
because I have the understanding of what I'm trying to create versus what this tool is,
yeah,
I'm able to sort of give it the direction and control it needs, mate. So we're fast approaching that kind of intersection, aren't we? Where we're going to be made as business owners or leaders, or whatever it might be, of these companies, to make that decision. Do you further invest in these people that can do these things, but accept that they're human? I mean, it's almost talking like humans are a bad thing, or we go this token charge pay, internet. What's the SaaS term? I suppose it's, intelligence as a service.
yeah,
IaaS.
yeah. Although people didn't like, I tried that one and people didn't like that. So it's kind of like
IaaS.
there's the one that is basically you put ARS together, agents as a service, but agents are just digital labor, basically. Yeah, in-source, outsource, offshore, nearshore. It's just, and I think the avoidance of, or people are trying to avoid calling it what it is because someone's saying to Wall Street, "I'm going to lay off 40% of people. AI is going to cover some of that base." Fact. They are saying we are going to have synthetic digital labor. There's no doubt,
Hmm.
but they don't actually say those words. And so if we come back to the enablement's got to cover like insane number of bases. They've got to be half decent at comms because, as you say, people are very sensitive about this. They're going to have to be quite touchy feely. They're going to have to be very, very hard ass on the kind of flabby job descriptions that I'm used to, basically in the past of. We're looking for an accountant, and she or he's got to have this and this and this. They're generally quite flowery, and they're long. They're massively long. They're like sometimes they were like it was writing a thesis on. They were like 5-6 pages. You're like, none of that's going to fly anymore. That's not going to fly.
Yeah.
So, and then you think about me writing it, then it going through HR, then it's got to go on some portal, then the portal goes to the recruiter, then the recruiter's doing something with it, back and forth. It was carnage. you know more than me. It's carnage. That kind of carnage cannot be this. And so that is part of AI enablement, of ripping out all that old requisition procedure. In fact, upsetting procurement somewhat, because procurement are used to that. Give me a PowerPoint of what it is, what they do. We'll do a beauty pageant. We'll do a comparison to the market. All of that's got to go. They might have to take over some procurement of certain services as well. That is a massive role, and they've got to be soft, touchy-feely, completely ruthless, very, 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 very detailed in terms of that. Understand process engineering of, we had 12 steps, we're going to have 2, and you're not going to write all the flowery stuff, man. Forget that creative writing bullshit. It's a hard-ass role.
Yeah. But then, it makes me think about a number of different things as you've been talking about here about, when that happens or if it happens, right? What does that really mean in terms of the labor market force? Because at the moment, the challenges are when you're looking for a job is that, you see it online all the time. Oh my God, so and so candidates use AI to make their CV. Then you've got these other LinkedIn people going, hey, it doesn't matter that AI is helping them write their CVs, all this sort of stuff, right? That seems to be the kind of generic focus at this stage in time, right? AI fighting AI and all this sort of stuff. Not whether companies are doing a good enough job about prescribing to them what their AI policy is.
Yes.
Their policy when it comes to AI applications, or how do they use AI to do assessments for these individuals, right? And then whether all of that in the end feeds to the kind of situation you're talking about, where actually we're going to get really slick with this, we're going to forget all this fluff, particularly when it comes to the agent. You're not going to need to prescribe all the kind of culture and benefit and all that sort of stuff anymore. It's just what the job is, And then it becomes a situation where that could work because the agents just need to know what they're doing versus you and me join a company and go, well, I'm here 8 hours a day, not at home with my kids. I need to make sure it's worth me, not just the money. I'm going to enjoy this place, right? So there's a bit of a yin and yang on that. Or where are we going to also then introduce this new world, mate, where you're going to get two sides, where you're going to get companies that only employ people that don't use AI at all, and I'm waiting to see, mate, whether there's a brave enough business out there. Like being a solo person trying to build a business, having AI is incredible because it helps you do these things that I simply cannot do. But if you're an established business and you've decided actually people are more important to me than being number one in terms of profit share or market, whatever it might be, market share, but we're still competitive and we can still make good money. This is what, are we going to see a brave company go down that route and not move towards this world where you're talking about, where actually we're just going to dumb it right down? This is what the job is. And the third and final point on this, mate, what I was saying is I'm going to be watching this with popcorn as to when these companies have these agent synthetic labor force working with your humans, and when that agent fucks up some way, right? How does it get managed, right? What happens? It can't lose its job. I mean, it doesn't have a job really. It's just a piece of code, right?
Yeah.
And also, how do you what's the way you appraise it? Is it through customer feedback? The way I work with it internally? The way you see it? Like, I don't know. Like, all these things are unknown, man. It's a real greenfield space where you're going to need some brave companies here who go, right, we're AI enablement first, that create these kind of little precedences and I guess step by steps, right? Because all those three factors I kind of talked about there could be very real soon.
Yeah, so you create a point, which I was thinking about, how do they rip it out? So you get rid of an employee, they write their last, I don't know, will and testament, I suppose, they write the procedures, they do SOPs, and you do all of that, and obviously you still have a lot of issues when employees have to leave. So you could argue part of the role is also that, of saying, okay, well, yeah, make up, break up, whatever, how do we get in and get out and obviously make sure things still work? So you almost need to kind of compose your organization like Lego, where, yeah, okay, we want a green piece, but you know what, it's the same size, let's get a mauve or purple piece. And you need to be able to do that. And I've never seen an organization that has been that kind of composable, where they're basically saying, you know what, we'll just swap one bloke out. It could be even mid-range accountant. We'll swap one accountant out for another. No. That accountant had loads of information in his or her head. And when you have agents, then you're not going to have anything in their head. But that's exactly the opposite of how agents work, because their agents are working on a recursive basis, and I'm getting more benefit out of Claude and GPT because it said, oh yeah, but last week you said this and this conflicts. You're like, yeah, you're right, I did say that last week and it's bullshit what I just said now. So it's starting to already show my internal conflicts with myself. So imagine that writ large over even like an email trail where it would just call out the CEO and say, that's bullshit, mate. You stood up at the town hall last week and said something completely different. You're like, whose agent is that? Whose agent is that? It's calling me out. So I'm just joking, but
That I'd pay for. That I'd pay for. Getting trolled.
how do you limit it? So I don't know. I think I like the idea, but this role, I don't know what people think it is, but if I were the CEO, this role would be probably the second or third in command behind the CEO, because it'd be like, this makes or breaks us as a firm. Because the minute we have one agent, it can go pear-shaped. We have 10, 20, 30, 50, 60 agents, just like employees. We're in a world of pain, in cost pain, in legal pain, in CISO pain, cyber pain, whatever pain. So I don't know. I kind of, if I was going to predict, and it's the right person, this could easily be the number two person in the organization, like the Tim Cook of a creative or organization that has a CEO, founder, that he or she has this vision, and then next person who comes in and just cranks the handle. I kind of think the enablement role could be that kind of Tim Cook successor.
I mean, yeah, you've got to be a massive visionary to execute it right. You know, there'll be a lot of people scrambling for this, thinking they could do this job in one shape or capacity or another. But I think there's such a non-exhaustive list of what your remits are and responsibilities are because of the unknown nature of these agentic models, right?
Yeah.
Look, mate, I mean, look, okay, for instance, very simple thing that could happen and very likely thing. Okay, so if you've seen memes about this already, right? You're a developer in 2020 or a run out of credits, which Claude does often, all the time, right? Despite their SpaceX deal that they've done, right? And the promise of more compute, man. Quite often, mate, it was 225 today. We've been on this call for a little longer, but if I've been working solidly through on Claude, mate, by this time of day, usually it's like, hey, you need to come back on at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Right? So imagine, so extrapolate this across the entire business from an enterprise level, okay? This happens, by the way, at pro, not just pro, but max, the max stuff,
I agree.
right?
I heard.
Okay. So what happens to your workforce when that happens? If you're using Claude, does the business just not work? What is like a simple discussion point, which is huge? What's the contingent of when that happens per department? What if you're facing externally? What happens?
Yeah.
Like, does the human become the contingent where they come in and supervise or not supervise? Sorry, substitute.
Yeah.
Like, mate, it's a massive job. So your view of it becoming like number two isn't a far-fetched prediction either, because of that context, man. The decision-making ability that you need to have that encompass such a broad spectrum that's primarily probably outside of your comfort zone if you've previously just been working in HR. You've got to have such good understanding as to these models, its impacts, its pros, its cons, contingents for the kind of example that I've kind of said there, plus all these others. What happens when who checks it? Like,
Yeah.
I
agree, mate. I think if Amazon does a lot of crazy shit with people and stuff and do contracts or whatever it's done in the past. But I don't think I've seen an organization with a clearer objective than Amazon. When I look at all the papers and stuff and the way that Jeff Bezos used to make people not do PowerPoint and you had to write a 6-page memo and all that sort of stuff, it kind of creates a focus. And I listen to the calls, the quarterly calls, I don't know, maybe once or twice a year. And every single call, they've got one metric which stands out. And I can't remember if it's 6 hours, 48 or whatever. They have average time to delivery if someone wants one. It's like 6 hours, 48 or something. I could be wrong on the time. But either way, it's every year it might come down like 10 minutes or something. People are, okay, the difference between 12 hours, 28 and 12 hours, 18. But because they have that metric, all of the ecosystem is built around that metric. Now, if man can walk around the Sheffield site faster, they don't care whether it's man or digital twin man. But if man can
Yep.
walk around quick because it's a fiddly thing in the Sheffield hangar, then they get a human doing it. If it's a robot, because it's more straightforward, they get a robot doing it. If it can be offshored, it can be offshored. If it could be the last mile of delivery, can be given to every even, can you rely on every DPD? They're going to do it. And I think that kind of one metricism, the made up ism, allows someone to say, whether it be the AI enabled person, say, look, we've got one goal. That's the goal. And
With this is
go on, mate. So,
no, sorry. I was going to say just quickly to interject. This is the point, right? Is this role about helping people work better with AI, or is it managing workforce transition as AI absorbs more tasks? Because in the example of the Amazon thing, you're right. You know, because they worship almost. They focus so intensely on that particular metric, which is, I think, time to answer a customer service call or delivery, right?
yeah,
One of those things. And as a business of the size, I mean, as the size that they are, bear in mind, mate, you got to think about one of the recessions. They dropped their stock price down by 90 something percent, you know, and they bounced right back up, and
yeah,
they are a behemoth, right? Like them or hate them, they're a behemoth, and you know, and they can become more and more efficient by adopting someone who does AI enablement, but is it for the purpose of helping people do their jobs better with AI, or is it replacing them in the end? And when it comes to the kind of factory floor piece that you spoke about there, man, you know, are you going to shave 10 minutes with people? Probably not, mate, unless you hire more people.
yeah,
Like if shaving the time off what didn't matter if you spent more money,
yes,
then you could do it with people.
yeah,
But if you're shaving the time off and you don't want to spend more money and you want to actually reduce the cost spend, then probably AI is your better bet. So
yeah,
it becomes these, yeah, mate, it's an overlap, isn't it, of incentives, goals, people, management,
yeah.
the right kind of temperament and bit of personality on this. Last point on Amazon, I didn't read the article, I read the headline this morning where apparently a lot of the big AI push has meant that a lot of their employees are fabricating their AI uses in
Uh, token, yeah, token.
in their reports.
Yeah, that's another thing. Behaviorally, it changes stuff. So if you're the enablement officer again, you're like, wow, do I want token maximum? Or maybe you do. That's the push. No different from your cultural pushes in organizations and stuff. So whether it be the culture, the cost control, the integration, the hard ass, kicking ass, etc. Yeah, it's a role that I hadn't really thought about it. I thought, oh, what the hell is that? That's just gimmicky. But actually, when you think about it, if you are going to, in an organization, bring in AI properly, then you need something radical. And I'm watching obviously I'm involved in the pricing space, and I listen to many different people talking about pricing and adding AI credits on top and stuff. And if I'm going to be brutal, man, they're really just moving deck chairs about.
Mm.
And you're like, no, you need to rewire around what is core. And unfortunately, the market is telling you what is core. When they're spending like, I don't know, 750 billion on infrastructure, which is to house new GPUs and CPUs and trainiums and stuff, they're telling you that basically the whole thing is going to be priced on a meter. Because that's it works. It's worked since 2006 or whatever, 5, 6. And so, unfortunately, your whole cost base is going to be arranged around a meter. And so, if you're not able to do that, then you're going to be caught short because you're going to be managing almost like we can manage your wages on once a month basis and we can do a 12-month cycle. It's quite easy with an increase or whatever. But actually, you can't do that because, to your point, at 235, someone's going to have to make a go, no-go call on, do you want me to do any work or can I just sign off as an agent, basically?
It- exactly, and it proposes two conundrums, isn't it? Because the exposure, that's probably what it is. It's the exposure. If you so imagine a world then you reduce your headcount by such a significant amount. So 14%, right, was Coinbase, yeah, but they replaced 14% of their workforce again with AI agents. Okay, so all those thousands, 700 people went. They've replaced them back with 700 different agents, right, that can now work with all these different areas. Okay, say that just hypothetically. Then the enablement person starts to work out, well, do you classify those as headcount?
Mm.
Does that matter? What happens when at 2:35 they cut the thing off and we've lost access to 14% of our workforce? Let's say it doesn't happen that way, and actually they want to keep you sweet and they keep giving you the top up or the overspending, and they won't charge you.
Yeah.
Right, so it's the tactic like Amazon did when they wanted market share, when they went really kaboom outside of books. We're going to give you $1 worth of goods for 90 cents, yeah, or 80 cents, what it was, and then
Yeah.
we become hooked. We
Yeah.
become so dependent on it, which is exactly what's happening here. This coverage becomes exposure, and you go, actually, it's been working so far, and we're getting so much stuff done. Gary, should we up our 14% of our workforce to now 20
Yeah.
to 25, so on and so forth? And before you know it, you've got 50% of your work done by agents.
Mm.
And then they go, right, now it's time to crank up the meter spending. I
Yeah.
mean, mate, if they change the pricing model, I mean, at the moment, it's very cost effective for me to do what I do. I can do those things I can do with 2 or 3 different agents, right, and still not kill myself at the moment over the course of a year. But if
Yeah.
you extrapolate this over a 10,000 person company at
Mm.
enterprise level, man, I mean, that's some serious money.
Yeah.
That if they change they change anything, mate, and they will have to, because as you quite rightly said, we're not talking millions, we're not even talking billions anymore. We're talking trillions in exposure and spend for them. They need to make their money back, man.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest issue, that every time I mention it, I just get no retraction at all. Insane. And so you can look at the cost of cloud, basically, and everybody will tell me the cloud has gone down, and you're like, no, it hasn't. It's really, really hard to work out the cost of your individual, because the compute and this and the capacity and the storage it's probably one of the most complicated things I've ever seen to work out, other than like derivatives, but those are straightforward maths. This is complicated because you have to combine so many things that there's no easy formula. And they give you kind of modules, but there's whole companies in this space of calculating that cost. And so if you are this enablement officer, you're going to got to be an investment person, as HR should have been in reality, because they are spending half a bar plus recruiting people.
You're right.
And
You're right.
in as many investments. So in that sense, you're saying each of these, I've got to decide the overall portfolio mix, because I know that a part of my investment, like the humans, I'm going to have to pay them on average 4% more a year, 5% up, depending on individuals. But say we budget 5% across the board every year for individual as a pool of money. But these agents, trust me, the cost of cloud, I would put my neck out and say, when I run queries on this, it's looking like about 6 to 8%, 9% a year. Sometimes it goes down because they want to connect you, work with a bit of competition, but generally you're looking at 6 to basically 9% a year. So you can say over a 10-year period, your cost is going to double. So you're like, oh, okay, shit. So unlike, say, that you could even dampen down wages by saying, oh, the economy's shit, why don't you go and leave, and you can give some people 2% and the other people 0 and not big bonuses. You could do all sorts of stuff in a bank to get that 5% down to about 2.5%. When you're extending the labour force, you can't really do that. You've got no leverage, because there's only, especially if there's only like 3 firms doing it, which there will be. There's already only like 2 or 3 that are serious. There'll be 2 or 3 firms that have got basically enough of the kind of cloud infrastructure and the best kind of GPU extent. So therefore, you're in a kind of oligopolistic kind of regime.
Well, I mean, to your point, you just need to look at Google's returns this quarter. It's all from cloud computing, and AI. Because it's gearing up towards that AI piece, right?
Yeah.
Mate, it's like, it's the old joke about crack dealers, isn't it? The first one's free, then they hike up the price for you. And this is what I mean. I find sometimes when I sit back and I'm guilty of it myself, because I am a huge AI adopter. I use it so much all the time, but I'm one person, trying to do punch way above my weight, mate. So I have to employ these tools. But when you're a big business like this and you're actively trying to, replace, enhance, and replicate human work with these kind of agent models, it's going to take some time to embed. And and you can see it, right? The rise of these FDEs, they come in, they help you embed. You get an AI enablement officer, head of AI, this and that. You're embedding, you're embedding. You're basically getting deeper and deeper into the tranche to stay ahead of the competition or to keep
Yeah.
pace with your competitors. But then as soon as these boys and girls decide, now we need to call in our money, because look at OpenAI, man, 5% of their people subscribe, pay. 5, that's it. No
Right.
one else, man. So they've got to find money somewhere. Otherwise, they're at risk. They're going to be, Codex is an incredible tool, mate. It's part of my subscription plan for £20 a month. I'm looking at this going, that's not going to be long term. No way.
No way.
No bloody way, mate.
Yeah. I hear you, mate. I think that's the kind of elephant in the room that it's not going to be the head of, it's not going to be CTO, it's not going to be CMO, it's not going to be COO. It's going to have to be this person, if they're willing to step up to say, we are in charge of the portfolio mix, and we have agreed with the board that we're not going to go any more than 9% of workforce kind of changeover or reduction or switch over, or we're going to go 12%, but it has to be done in a kind of very obvious, overt way of, this is what I took to the board, this is what our portfolio mix I think is reasonable, this is the leverage, these are the kind of purveyors or the suppliers, whatever. And it's got to be done in that kind of the same way your pension company or investment company will manage your pension fund. Say, well, I'm not going to go all bonds, I'm not going to go all stocks, I'm not going to go all like crazy, like oil or whatever. It's manage a portfolio. And sometimes it looks like you're losing money because things have obviously gone through to the moon, but you're not, because you're running a portfolio. And I've not seen anybody think of the human resource as a portfolio, investment portfolio, which doesn't always need to be optimized like it's crypto and altcoins. It's a portfolio built for stability, not for altcoin going.
But you're right. In the sense of things, I don't really invest because mainly because I don't have the capital. But any person that I've ever spoke to about investment gives you the same advice, particularly in times of uncertainty, which is what we're going through. Have a diversified portfolio, right? And when you come to think about your own workforce, why would you not have a diversified workforce? And I don't mean it in the sense of DEI, like different skin colors and genders. I'm talking about different levels, different generations of workers, different skills, that diversity will make you so powerful. And as part of that should, yes, probably include some of the synthetic labor force in there, because I think it's unavoidable. But those that are running into it like turkeys at Christmas, mate, turkeys voting for Christmas, to go, let's just go nuts on this, overexpose ourselves without really, really clearly understanding about what's, mate, because if those big companies sneeze, you're going to catch a cold. What if they, do you know what I mean? They change the price, they go bust, they get it, whatever it is, man. I mean, I was looking at the secondary markets, man. Anthropic is worth $1 trillion.
Yeah. I've got a views about
those.
I think if they can get off this year, them and OpenAI, I think this is I've said this for ages, basically, not investment advice, but something will catch up with these guys, and they will continue because they're monopolies, and I think they'll be part of monopolies, so you'll be fine. But essentially, back to the Google point, if you're the enablement officer, you're thinking, well, Google is going to Google, Meta's going to Meta, Amazon's going to Amazon. So you know that their prices are going to go up consistently, because that's just like playbook 101 in finance in a big firm. If I can increase prices by 5-6%, nothing enough to get people with pitchforks on the street, but just like, I expect 6%. That 6% compound and is more than you paid for your labor. And then on top of that, I might do a few more tweaks, which you can't do with your labor. It'd be almost like you take on someone and then you change the terms of their agreement of employment, which some companies do, don't get me wrong, but in a restrictive way that makes it mean that man would not have been taking this salary if he had joined on these terms. And they do it with software all the time. You've had it done with Claude, I've had it done with GPT, where they say, well, yeah, I know, but we're not going to include that. So it's like managing an employee, but with a higher increase in salary every year and with more terms that either the employee is going to add on willy-nilly. Basically, I want more holiday. And they'll be like, no, you agreed this contract 2 years ago, you got 6 weeks, mate. No, I want 12 weeks holiday. And firms in a powerful position will do that. And so this enablement officer will have to be as I say, pretty rock and roll to do all of these things that we think they should be doing.
So they need a HR capacity, an investment kind of mind, technical understanding. They need to be risk adverse. They need to be an effective communicator, a leader, and they need to really understand long-term vision as well of this stuff. Mate, I'll tell you what, on a curveball on this stuff, right? These guys, these boys and girls do have a monopoly, but I think if they rest in their laurels, they'll be in trouble because, hey man, I mean, look, Trump's over in China today, yeah, and they're doing a state visit and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Mate, China's AI environment and ecosystem is
Killer.
like it. I mean,
Yeah.
it is insane, and it's open source, and it's lightweight models, and it's cheap,
Yeah.
cheap, 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 cheap. Mate, they could kneecap the American economy, let alone the AI economy, if they basically looked at what's going on here. Like you and I, if we owned a massive business, mate, and we were really, really tangled deep into Claude, and every other day they change their terms, go, you can't do this with the SDK now, or we
Yeah.
restrict this capacity with Claude Code and co-work and all this sort of stuff. You and I can look for a Chinese model, mate, and go, well, what's the comparative parameters here? Can we embed this in lightweight, low cost? You'd be fine again, So there is a balancing act that they need to sort of take on, and that's why they're not moving towards increasing the rates that they are doing at this stage in time. But the moment they go public, mate, if they
Yeah.
go public, I mean, secondary market's one thing, but if you go public, that's a
Yes.
different expectation, in my opinion. So that's when I think we can start seeing, a real bonfire get lit there about what happens with these businesses. And by that time, how many people are going to have these AI enablement individuals in their businesses? And what does that really mean for them, right?
Okay, so as we wrap up, I'll give my final monologue and you give yours. I would say that I think, and I hadn't thought this before, that this could be the most exciting role in tech since product management. And I picked product management because essentially you could argue that even today, most people don't know what they do. So we know they get paid a lot of money. We know they get promoted very thinly. We know they got loads of stock options in the valley. And we know that actually it was brought about by a change. When I was young, I studied project management, Prince 2 and all that malarkey. And then when you had software development lifecycle come in and you could constantly change product and you could roll it out every week, every day, every minute, then you needed someone sexier than a project manager who's going to basically do some waterfall nonsense. So I jest about product management, but I know it was a necessary skill, and some of them are absolutely insanely brilliant. Speaking to them and listen to them. So you say, what is a forced change on the market? Because structurally, that's just the way it had to go from project management to product management. And as we move from kind of easygoing software to help man to actually man's in now a mortal combat with the software, which could replace him. So man's constantly racing to keep up with himself to make sure he's better in a way better than the software. Then it's a very different skill, and that means we need someone to manage that, and that person could be AI enablement.
Your parallel's interesting though, because project management, I feel, is broader. Product manager becomes a bit more specific to that particular product, right? Or an
Yeah,
aspect of that product, right? Same as you, mate. Despite having filled a number of different product manager roles and having a good number of people, product managers in my kind of network space, their role remains a bit of a myth, even though I was doing it myself for my for my little startup, man.
yeah,
But you're much more laser focused to an extent in terms of the kind of noise of the company. You're very focused around that. Yes, of course, you touch upon these different elements because so many things touch the product. So you're aware of the customer journey. You're aware of feedback through customer success and so on and so forth. But you're very, very specific in that sense. This AI enablement, I think, is the inverse of that. You have to you have to know everything about the business, right? Not immediately, but you will. I think it should be right for you to be expected to understand and engage with certainly every leader, most managers, and ideally the workers, really the people on the front line that you're trying to pair up or replace with AI enablement. And it comes back down to: what's the purpose of this role? Are you trying to replace these people? Or are you trying to help them, with AI? And once you've decided on those things, then you can control that role. This role is very important in ensuring the success and maybe the future success of the business through AI If you don't get that exposure right, then you're in trouble. So, you know, it will be a very sought after position, mate. But I can't think of many candidates. I mean, if I was a headhunter, where do you even start with this? Like, it's broad as hell, man. You know,
Yeah.
and you can't be a mid inch, you can't be a mile wide, inch deep on
Yeah.
things.
Sure.
You got to be a mile wide, a mile deep on a lot of this stuff. I mean, think about that investment piece that we just talked about, mate.
Yeah.
To have the cognitive understanding as to actually what do all these terms mean in this contract, because when you extrapolate these kind of, we they change anything by 1-2%, and you've started moving more of your workforce in that side, man, that's
Yeah.
grave. That's
Yeah.
damage is grave. So you've got to have a lot of detailed understanding in that sort of sense. So as we've been talking, I've been going, I don't know anybody immediately that springs to mind to do this role.
No,
You know.
that's part of the problem, man. Why they haven't been able to roll it out, the impasse of culture that you mentioned, and the absorption of
Mhm.
risk. Why should I take the risk for the whole organisation? I run a function. I'm the CTO. I will security bit. I will do that bit. I'm the CMO. Yes, I'm going to utilize, but no one in that boardroom wants to take full responsibility for the rollout of AI. They'll all do it piecemeal, and as you said, it won't work piecemeal. It has to be done as a cultural change across the whole firm. And so that impasse is only really solved by you appointing someone who had an accountable role. And that accountable role could be called this, could be called head of workforce management, synthetic labour, whatever you want to call it. They need someone who had that responsibility and accountability to get sacked, really.